This is Intro to KidLit with the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators with Melissa Miles and Lisa Lowe Stauffer. Lisa, we're going to start with you. I'm going to read off their bios here for those who haven't had a chance to read it. As a child, hiding under the covers to read book after book, Lisa Lowe Stauffer secretly longed to write fiction herself. She also wanted pet monkeys. But first, she had to write her way through journalism, marketing, consulting, travel writing, and poetry. Her work has appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Miami Herald, Literary Mama, Stories for Children, and numerous business websites, brochures, newsletters, press releases, and magazine articles. With the publication of 2x2 in 2018, both of her childhood wishes came true, although the pet monkeys are two small puppets who claim the book as their own. Check out #monkeys2 on Twitter to see their adventures. Please go ahead and follow Lisa on Instagram and Twitter. She has some really good stuff for you. And Melissa Miles is a registered nurse and certified K-12 educator, as well as a children's book author. She founded the nonprofit Superhero Success Foundation in 2019 and has published 2 picture books benefiting the nonprofit, which offers scholarships and donates books to children's hospitals. Melissa is a co-regional advisor, just like Lisa, for the Southern Breeze region of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and is represented by Kristen Terrett at Martin Literary Management. Did I say Kristen's last name right, Melissa?
Terrett.
Terrett. Okay, thank you. All right, welcome, ladies. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to take kind of a basic approach here. Let's talk a little bit about the society. You guys are co-regional directors for the Southern Breeze region. I also work as the contest coordinator, which is opening up June 1st. I'm really excited for the contest to be opening up so quickly. You know, we're going to be talking about that a little bit here, but tell us, let's start with you, Melissa. Tell me kind of a broad overview of what the society is and how it supports the community of KidLit.
So SCBWI is the professional organization for children's book writers and illustrators, and now translators, if you have the skills to translate books into other languages. It is a 501c3 company. It's global. There's regions all over the world. In the United States, they're divided up. It's not just like one state, like New York has multiple regions, so does California, so does Texas. Because there's not quite the concentration of children's book writers and illustrators in the Southeast where we are, our region is made up of the whole entire state of Alabama and Georgia, plus the panhandle of Florida. So that is the Southern Breeze region. And the region is volunteer led. So Lisa and I are the co-regional advisors. We have an assistant regional advisor and an illustrator coordinator. And then lots of other volunteers that work as well, just tirelessly to help us put on programming every month. The big SCBWI has a lot of grants and awards that they give out. They have a foundation wing that gives a lot to charity that's run by Lynn Oliver, who was our previous executive director for SCBWI. It's wonderful. There's lots of opportunities within the organization. So yeah. I've been a member less time than Lisa. I think I joined in 2016.
2016. Okay.
And wanted to start writing books for kids and started doing some research. And this name came up. Even the very first little course I took, which was to renew my teaching certification. It was just a writing for children, I think it was called. And in the very first lesson, they suggested joining SCBWI. Yeah.
That's perfect. That is perfect. Yeah, I wrote an article recently on attending the SCBWI conference that we did not too long ago. Was it in Carolinas, the Carolinas conference. And I remember kind of writing in there that every genre of, novel writing essentially, or children's lit or KidLit or whatever it is, it has a champion, like an organization that really upholds, the genre and offers support and resources. And SCBWI is that for KidLit. It is essentially, if you're not a part of it and you're interested in KidLit or dabbling in it, you definitely need to join at some point in time, because just you're missing out on a lot of the resources there. So So tell me, Lisa, specifically, what do you feel like is the most positive thing that SCBWI has given you as an author and being a part of it? Like, how do you feel like it supports? I mean, I just said it supports the author community, but how do you feel like that practically helps authors, navigate the KidLit realm? If you're brand new, getting into KidLit, what's the kind of support that you can expect?
So when you join SCBWI, you get access to their publications, one of which is called The Essential Guide to Writing for Children. And it is basically like the writer's market books that we used to buy in in Barnes and Noble once a year, but only it's just KidLit. It has agents and publishers and articles about how to write the different levels of for KidLit. And that's free for membership. SCBWI Big puts on a digital series several times a year with presentations like this with really well-known authors and illustrators from around the world, mostly about craft, sometimes about business. At the regional level, like me and Melissa, we hold monthly meetings with presentations, and we have several discussion groups online each month, some of which you can get your pages critiqued. Some are discussing things like breaking down a picture book. We have someone who might start a middle grade novel book club, which would be awesome.
Oh, nice.
To do online. So, and you can attend things from any other region. It's not like, oh, I can't go to the Carolinas or I can't go to Alaska. If they're offering something online, you can sign up for it as well. Most of the things at the regional level are either free or low cost. Regions are kind of operate a little bit independently, so it varies from place to place. So having said all that, for me as a writer, the thing that matters is community. I would have quit this business 1,000 times if it weren't for the people that I had gotten to know, and the friends and the critique partners and the ones who say, oh, I really like that. I think there's something there. Yeah, it's a community that is very supportive. It's not competitive. It's often when we get people into the KidLit world who have come out of screenwriting, they don't want to share their ideas. They're so afraid someone's going to just take it and run with it. That almost never happens in the KidLit world.
Yeah.
It's just a community that is much more supportive of each other than most of the other writing communities I've heard of.
Yeah, I love that. That is kind of a misnomer among screenwriters is this idea, oh, I don't want to share my log line or my concept because I'm afraid of it getting picked up. That doesn't happen often, but like you said, where there's smoke, there's been fire at some point in time. But I have had the personal experience that I've had with SCBWI and the conferences and the people that I've met, everybody is incredibly just like awesome. And for whatever reason, everybody in publishing is just nicer. I don't know why. Like everybody, like sending out queries, you actually get responses, even if they're rejections, it's helpful feedback. It's like night and day in terms of publishing versus trying to pave the way with film and TV. But we probably have a lot of screenwriters here tonight who are either dabbling in KidLit or at least are interested in exploring the medium if you're not an author already. So what would you say is kind of like the overview? Like if a screenwriter is moving into KidLit, how do you know the genre? How do you know what format to go after? I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of kid books. Can you give me, Melissa, like kind of a layout of like the broad genres, you said you're writing a middle grade earlier, like what is that, why don't you give us a little bit of a layout here?
So you have picture books, which, I mean, even before that, you have like little board books, right? Like think about when you had little kids and you have the little chunky board books that might be like 11 or 12 pages, and they either have no words or just maybe very few words. And then you have picture books, which are usually about 32 pages. Every page is going to be illustrated. Those can be anything from rhyming books to, specifically kind of bedtime stories. They can be adventure stories. They can be biographies or nonfiction books. We have quite a few really talented nonfiction writers in our region who do great, like STEM books and science books.
Yeah.
And then you have chapter books, easy readers. There's kind of, those little ones that are like when my kids were young, the Henry and Mudge or the Magic Tree House books, but now there's all new series for that little specific group of readers. And then you get into middle grade, which generally is about 8 to 12-year-olds.
Mhm.
So, fourth graders, fifth graders, they want stories where the kids are doing things on their own, like taking risks, going on adventures, standing up to bullies, all those kind of popular things that you wanted to read about. I loved Pippi Longstocking when I was a kid because I thought not having parents telling you what to do was like the absolute best thing in the world.
It's the best. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted a monkey as well, Lisa. Always wanted a monkey and a horse to just like put on my front porch. Seemed amazing. So that's like the middle grade audience. And then you have the young adult, right? Those are the books that, we hear about because they're, the Hunger Games and Twilight, a lot of books where you have teenagers and then the stakes get higher than they are in middle grade. There's usually a romance involved. They're taking a lot more agency because, they can drive and they have jobs sometimes. And so, they're definitely higher stake books, but in just those kind of age limits, you have everything from graphic novels are huge right now. You have verse novels are growing in popularity. You have nonfiction, even for, middle grade and young adult, a lot of popular nonfiction in those two age groups. So there's just like kind of something for everybody. And if you are looking to break into KidLit, I would say, what do you enjoy reading? Like, what did you either enjoy reading as a kid or what do you still enjoy reading? I mean, I still enjoy reading middle grade novels. I love them. There's a little bit of kind of innocence still there. They're wholesome and clean. They're not going to keep me up at night. I am a big fat chicken, so I cannot read like horror. I can't read any of those like grisly thrillers, those crime thrillers. And so I know that if I pick up, a novel that's written for 8 to 12-year-olds, it's going to be perfectly safe.
Not going to keep you up at night. I like that. Are you reading something right now?
My favorite middle grade novel of the past like 5 years is The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. I love that story. It's really great. It's Dan, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Giemenhart. And he was a media specialist. And I think he just really knows what kids are looking for. And it's just a really beautiful, emotional story.
I love that. And you're writing something right now, a middle grade right now.
I am. I have a verse novel that's on submission right now. So I'm hoping a publisher is going to pick that up. And I'm writing actually another verse novel that I'm rewriting it in verse. It was originally written in prose. And I'm writing a new middle grade novel about a kid that spots somebody that's supposed to be dead on a webcam. And he starts a podcast saying, hey, isn't this who this guy is? Does anybody else think? And he attracts the attention of some really dangerous people. So it's probably the scariest book I've written yet.
I was about to say, I mean, that's getting into territory you're not used to there, Melissa. So you better watch out. I love that. So Lisa, you have a published book 2x2, right?
I do.
So,
it's a board book.
It's a board book. Could you tell us a little bit about how you settled first on the format of board book, the kind of the concept, how it came to you, and maybe the process of actually getting it published? Did SCBWI help you with that process, or was this something that you paved the way yourself?
It's a little complicated. I'll keep it brief.
Great.
As most of these stories are. I came out of journalism and I was a big novel reader and I love middle grade novels like Melissa does. I wrote 7 novels. They never went anywhere.
Wow.
I had an agent. She shopped a couple of them around. They just never went anywhere. And then I needed to go back to full-time work. And I thought, well, this is it. I've shot my shot and, I'm a novelist. It's not going to happen. You can't, it's too hard, blah, blah, blah. And, but I love my friends in SCBWI. And so I told myself, okay, if there's something local, I'm going to go just to be with my friends because I need this.
Mhm.
And the first thing that was local was a weekend poetry retreat. And in my head, I'm like, I am not a poet. I'm a journalist. I write long form stuff. I write novels. I've written 7 novels. Poetry, well, okay, I'll go. I'm going to see my friends. We'll have a good time. I absolutely fell in love with it. It turns out that what I love best about writing is not the plots and the character development. It's that final stage of getting every word just right. And that is something I did with my journalism, my marketing, my communications. I wanted to get just the right word, just the right lead sentence, just the right ending sentence. And poetry hit that again. And I was shocked. I also realized that for me, working full time, and I was working in marketing, so I was writing all day, every day, blog posts, magazine articles.
Right.
That's just all I did all day. I still had the bandwidth to play with the words, to play with some poetry while I was driving, after work, over lunch. I could work on a stanza or 3 or 4 words, and that satisfied something creative in me. Well, lo and behold, one of my poems spun out into 150 words, and it was appropriate for a picture book. And my agent shopped it as a picture book. However, the publisher decided to publish it as a board book. It did it. It's still 150 words. It's still the same story. They just condensed it down to, I think it's 8 double-page spreads instead of 32. And it's appropriate for that. The language is a little old for a toddler. However, the artist they paired me with is just wonderful. And I regularly get direct messages on Instagram and Twitter from people that I don't know who say, my baby loves your book.
Oh my gosh. That must be so satisfying. Yeah, I love that.
I know, it's really fabulous. So since then, I've worked in novels again a little bit, but I really think that my forte is picture books. And that is where I'm spending my time these days.
That's wonderful. That is excellent. So you had an agent with the 7 novels specifically that you had written before. So you actually acquired an agent with your prior existing work, and then you kind of discovered the picture book process along the way while you were agented. Is that correct?
Exactly. And a lot of the agents in children's literature do represent a variety of age groups and genres within the KidLit world.
So it wasn't like out of left field for your agent at this point?
No, she was shopping picture books for other clients.
Okay, awesome. That's amazing. So I would love to hear a little bit about just the process of acquiring an agent. If you think it's necessary for KidLit people, for KidLit authors to go that direction, are there other avenues for people to go? So Melissa, why don't you paint me the picture of, how do you build a career in KidLit? What are the big paths that authors will take? Representation, non-representation? Tell me a little bit about that.
So I actually, you mentioned when you introduced me that I have a nonprofit. And I wrote a picture book about a character that has a tracheostomy tube based on one of my patients. And we just came up with this fun idea that he would be a superhero and he would be able to shoot a tornado blast out of his trach tube. So what I did with that book, because I wanted to have complete control over the proceeds so that all of the money raised from the book could go into the nonprofit for scholarships for kids that are served under special ed in our school system here. And to also be able to donate a lot of books to children's hospitals and camps for special needs kids and things like that. I had a Kickstarter campaign to raise the money and found the absolute perfect illustrator. He is a professor here in Savannah at the Savannah College of Art and Design, but he's also a graphic novelist. And so this is our first book that we collaborated on together. Nice. And so Jeremiah Justice shoots it, like a tornado blaster out of his tracheostomy.
Great.
And it's like Lisa said, when you get emails and messages from parents that say, my child wants to read this book every night before bed, or he says "pshaw" when his when he
Oh, that's great.
blaster. And I have also gotten my child won't stop saying Pashal, thanks a lot. But you know, but you can publish on your own, right? So I raised the money, I hired an illustrator, I paid for an editor, I paid for a cover designer, all of that, right? And you can definitely do that. I've done that with 2 books. The problem with self-publishing in KidLit, well, I guess with any self-publishing, you really have to be a business person. You have to be willing to invest the time and money up front into getting a good product and then continually market the product, right? To get it out there. People really, I mean, people who are really good at it can make good money doing it.
Sure.
You find your little niche, you write a series, that's kind of the ticket. People love those series, especially children. If they know they like your first book, they're going to want your second book. I did want to traditionally publish the novels and other picture books because, you know, you can reach more people when you're traditionally published, right? Your agent can have access to the big publishers that you can't as an unagented writer. And then your books are going to be in more stores. They're going to maybe be in book fairs at schools, things like that. And so you're getting your book out there to a wider audience. And I can't say instead of that you can get it out to more people than all self-publishers, because there are some phenomenal self-publishers who I'm in awe of because they just really, really get this business and know how to do it. That is not me. That's not my personality. I don't love the business side of it. So, so for me, finding an agent and pursuing traditional publishing was something that I wanted to do not for the nonprofit books, but for my personal books.
Yeah. I've also heard that in terms of trying to choose kind of the self-published path versus the traditionally published path, I mean, know thyself as an author, right? I mean, there are some authors out there who are very collaborative, and they're all about, hey, take my manuscript, you know, kind of take it apart, you know, let me know what the flaws are, rewrites, you know, that whole system. Which you should expect from a traditional publishing path, because once you hand it over to that in-house editor, you know, it is no longer your manuscript in a lot of respects, versus the self-published path, you have creative control. You know, if you are very precious about your work and meticulous about who touches it, or you don't want anybody to touch it, then maybe self-publishing is also a direction that you can take on that front. I actually had a conversation with a writer not too long ago where I was trying to give him notes on his manuscript, and it was clear to me that that wasn't the route, and was like, you know what, I think you should go and conquer the self-published space, because that seems like something that you are very oriented toward. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a matter of like pushing people into the right direction, or, you know, trying both paths at one point in time, depending on, you know, how long your career is there. So and I wanted to add, yeah, go ahead, please.
I mentioned the book, The Essential Guide for Children's Publishing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you can download it. I actually have a hard copy of it here, but
Okay.
you can download it as just a PDF off the website when you're logged into your member account. But it has a whole section in here of publishers that you can submit to without an agent.
Oh, there you
So
go.
it's generally the big ones, right? Penguin Random House, Simon and Schuster, you know, the big publishers that they call them the big 5, that you have to have an agent to get through the door, unless you are invited to submit at a conference, which is another reason to go to conferences, because you submit to editors that you normally couldn't submit to. Right. But that's one good thing to look at. So if you are an SCBWI member and you have a manuscript that you want to shop to a publisher without an agent, you know, look and get the contacts.
I love that. And that's considered kind of the indie route, like the indie publishing house route, you know, where publishing houses will accept unrepped material. Is that correct?
Not really. Indie's more self-publishing. If you're an indie publisher, you're doing the publishing. It's small presses and mid-sized presses but it's still traditional publishing. If you have a publisher that's doing all of the work for you, not a vanity press, like this would be like, you're not paying them anything, right? They're still buying your work and they're paying you, no matter how small they are. That's still traditional publishing.
Gotcha. I love that. Okay. And
Can I,
Lisa,
can I add
Go
one
ahead,
thing
yes.
about self-publishing?
Yeah.
So, in the adult publishing world, if you self-publish a book, say you're writing about a rock star who falls off a cliff, whatever, some thriller. And you can target with Google AdWords and Facebook ads and put, with Amazon and get your book promoted and all of that. And adults who like to read thrillers will often be online looking for the next best thriller. 8-year-olds are not online looking for the next novel to read. Parents of 4-year-olds are often not online looking for a new bedtime story because they're too tired. Teenagers are often online looking for the next great read. So the way that most children come to new books and families, especially that elementary school age, which we refer to as middle grade, is through libraries, school librarians, teachers. And the pipeline for wholesale to schools is not always self-publishing friendly. It can be difficult to get your books into that pipeline. So before you make the plunge and the financial investment, like what Melissa did with her picture book is spot on, because it is kind of a niche in the picture book world. And she has worked the ropes to get it into various pipelines and getting it, I don't know if it's been reviewed. Book reviews are a big thing, not just the Amazon reviews, but the Hornbook and Kirkus and some of those old-fashioned book review gatekeepers. And that's where librarians go to look for their books that they're going to stock. A little bit rambly, just to say that it's the pipeline can be difficult if you are writing a book for kids that you really need to sell to a gatekeeper first.
Right.
It's hard to reach those gatekeepers sometimes.
I love that. No, it's good because it's a matter of you knowing your content. I mean, like you said with Melissa's book, you said it was niche, and so it seemed appropriate for what she did, in the self-published realm, hiring the editor, hiring the illustrator and all that stuff. But if it's more maybe wide market based or whatnot, then maybe a traditional published path might be the best option to go at first, potentially. So definitely know the material that you're putting out there, before choosing the path for it. I think we actually have a couple of questions over here from some attendees, so we'll start into those now. So we're going to start with Victoria. Does KidLit SCBWI include YA? Yes, I believe Melissa talked a little bit about that. She said, I feel like YA is sort of the middle school kid of the literary world. It's not elementary and it's also not secondary.
Yeah. Well, kids read higher than they are, right? So if they're in 6th or 7th grade, they want to read about 14, 15, 16, 18-year-olds. They want to read about older kids. So a lot of who's reading YA are actually younger kids, like kids that are in middle school.
I think I read Harry Potter when I was like, I don't know, I was pretty young. I probably shouldn't have read it that young, actually. So talk about those nightmares. You remember that stuff very vividly whenever you read a book that's higher than yourself, because your imagination goes wild for sure. So okay, so Sue Kelly over here is asking if SCBWI is in Canada.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are chapters in Canada, and they are active and run webinars and things like that as well.
And you also mentioned that even if you're like in a different chapter, you can still join, like other regions, even internationally, other stuff, or?
There is SCBWI is launching a brand new website in a couple of weeks. And as it unrolls, you will be able to get news from several regions instead of just your own. So that's kind of an exciting new change for members. So it'll be easier to keep up with other chapters. And you might, pick one that's very active, or you might pick one, where your parents live that you go visit often, or, just one that sounds great. One of the best webinars I attended in the last year was out of Belgium.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Love that. just exposing you to different, authors around the world. That's pretty amazing, actually. So I love that. Okay, so we have a question here from Tia. Okay, this might be one for you, Melissa, here. So she says she's working on a series of books. She's also working with children. She has an artist friend and who wanted to do the illustrations, but it seems she shouldn't query with an illustrator. Is that true?
That's the conventional advice, is that when you traditionally publish, the publisher wants to find their own illustrator.
Okay.
So there'll be an art director at that publishing house, and they have illustrators they work with, and they keep all of the different styles from those portfolios, and they try to find a match that they think really fits with the text. Because the picture books are just basically like a marriage of the words and the art, right? They've got to really go well together. And if you query together, and the agents or the publishers, depending on if you're querying directly to a smaller publisher, they might love the pictures, but not the words, or they might love the words and not the pictures. And then they'll say no to the whole project.
Okay.
So that's traditional advice. Now, that doesn't mean it's never happened, but the conventional wisdom in publishing is to not query as a team. If you've already got the illustrator.
Does it also mean that you haven't gone out? So something that's common, for example, like in the graphic novel or comic book world, is you have actually, developed maybe the first 5 pages of the graphic novel and you query with that, kind of deal. So is that not something you do with picture books at all? Like, no.
You do it if you're the author illustrator. So if you're doing both, so you would do that for a graphic novel or a picture book. You would submit like a book dummy that has, or a pitch for a graphic novel that has some of the art completed.
Gotcha.
But with graphic novels taking off as fast as they are, there may be a little bit of change in that coming. But as of right now, that's the latest that I've heard. Is that what you would say, Lisa, as well?
That's what I've heard too.
Yeah.
Especially because in a graphic novel with so much art is a whole lot of work. So unless you are determined to be the illustrator, don't go do a lot of that work before you find out if there's a market for it.
Right. And say a publishing house picks up your either your graphic novel design or your picture book. Do you have any say as an author in, maybe what you envision in terms of an illustrator being partnered with you? Or is that just something you just kind of surprise? Here's the illustrations at the end of that process. What's that like?
It totally depends on the house. Some editors and art directors like to make all those choices. And what they bring to it is really fresh eyes. Because if you've been writing it, you have this idea, this is what it's going to look like. But somebody with the graphic design sensibility, the artist sensibility, may look at your words and take it in this whole other direction that adds so much depth and meaning to it.
Right.
So I had no choice. Well, let me back it up. When my editor chose an illustrator, they did show me some of her art and say, do you think we like her? What do you have any objections? And I said no, because her art was really cute. And when she had completed the artwork and they're a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of changes, I did get to look at the artwork and suggest a couple of changes, one of which they took, one of which they didn't. And, that's the only interaction I had with the illustrator. My illustrator, and Angelika Scudamore is her name. I should have said her name. She lives in London. And a couple years after this book was published, I was in London and we actually got to sit down and meet.
Oh, that's lovely.
That was really cool. You often never get to meet your illustrator.
Right. Yeah, that's what I heard. Okay. Well, that's cool. That must have been a fun experience.
It was.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. Well, curious minds are wondering, Barbara, how can you join the SCWBI? Or SCBWI. I think we had it backwards. So
Jeannie put the website in the chat, I believe.
Yeah. I think we'll put the website in there, Jeannie. And for those who are curious, you guys are welcome to pop on there. We are going to mention it again, probably at the very end, but SCBWI is for the Southern region is launching. Its contest is going to be open for submissions June 1st through June 30th. So that's coming up really quickly. I will be funneling all of those entries as they come in. And we have a great lineup of judges and lit agents at the end of that process to judge and critique those materials. The cool thing about this contest, just a really quick plug on that, is everybody gets feedback on it. And I think that's very important for everybody who enters. It was for me whenever I participated last year. So, okay. So Barbara, you can go check that out on their website. Okay. So we have another question from Reese. Here we go. An editor told me a kid's book with main characters who are stand-ins for adults will likely have to be self-published, as traditional publishers wouldn't take it unless the main characters were dealing with kids' problems only. Do you think this is true?
Pretty much. The, an elementary school age child, 7 or 8 to 12 or 13, they are figuring out who they are in the context of their family, their friends, their neighborhood. It's this very small world. Teenagers are starting to look outside to get some validation. Who am I in the larger world? But the problems they're dealing with are a whole different scale. They're equally as important emotionally, but it's a whole different scale than the things adults deal with. One example of this, I happen to be watching the Judy Blume documentary. I think it's on Prime right now. And Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which so many people grew up with. The girls are worried about getting their periods and getting bras and, the cute boy and all these things that adults aren't worried about anymore. So, I think that's a real good example of a book where you need to, that's successfully channeled the very real worries and problems of a child in a way that children can relate to, learn from, and grow from. So what your editor said about the characters being stand-ins for adults, and I can imagine some scenarios where that might work, but it would be a tricky thing. It would be a really tricky thing to pull off.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is a personal curiosity. So because we have some screenwriters in the room, and a lot of the reference that, for example, feature-length writers would have in terms of like you're equating, right, KidLit to the screenwriting world is like Pixar animation, something like that, right? Like these big Pixar movies, Toy Story, Finding Nemo, things of that nature. How would you translate, where would you place exactly a Pixar film that oftentimes deal with like really big topics, like socially, like you said, it's not necessarily just kid-space topics. Where would you translate that over into the KidLit world? Or would you?
I mean, like Toy Story would be like chapter books, picture books, maybe.
Yeah.
Possibly early middle grade. But then you have, trying to think, some of them definitely, what was the one with all the emotions?
Inside Out. Yeah, I love that.
That could definitely be like middle grade, upper middle grade.
Yeah.
And the character was that age, right? She was like maybe 4th, 5th grade, the main character.
Yeah.
And Andy in Toy Story was a little
Yep.
bit, maybe a little bit younger than that though. Maybe, I don't know, 6, 7, I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, they do kind of translate, because they're dealing with a lot of the same issues, bullies and, being accepted for who you are.
Fitting in.
And there was one recently read, right?
I loved that one. Yeah.
So she's like, how do you all those emotions you feel? And that one also dealt with like your expectations your parents have of you. All of these things that are in these Pixar films are themes in KidLit.
Perfect. And you feel like they could translate, just you would have to kind of maybe streamline it to maybe like one topic at a time or something like that. So.
No, for novels, no, you can have a lot of different kind of sub threads running through. You have one main like character arc, but then you also have a lot of different little things going on. Because
so would you say that complexity kind of starts in middle grade up or upper middle grade up?
Yeah, I think middle grade.
Middle grade. Okay.
Middle grade can deal with some really heavy topics, homelessness, being in the foster system, eating disorders, obesity, bullying, your parents splitting up, you're trying to figure out the death of a sibling or friend. A lot of really heavy topics are in middle grade.
Right. I mean, kids experience these things.
They
I mean,
do.
there has to be subject matter out there for them to be able to, process all of the things that they go through, these emotions and stuff. I mean, I think we forget that a lot of time with KidLit. It's a huge educational tool, not just in terms of just learning, socially your environment and the fun, positive things in life, but also how to process some of those harder things that kids experience when they're young too. So
You learn empathy because you're reading about someone and you're kind of in their head for that period of time that you're reading about them.
Sure.
So you're learning about things that you never had to deal with. So if you're a middle class, white kid somewhere, you might be learning about racism that you've never experienced personally. You're learning about an immigrant experience and what it's like to be made fun of because you speak a different language or you eat different foods or you have a different religion. You're learning about, all kinds of things. I mean, even when I was a kid, I loved reading books about cities, people who lived in apartments or rode the bus. Because, I lived in the suburbs, so I never experienced that kind of urban life. So, you just learn through reading. That's how kids learn.
I love that. No, that's really important to keep in mind. Okay, we have a couple more questions here and we are in the last quarter of the hour already. I feel like that flew by really quickly, but I do want to end also on giving you guys a chance to talk a little bit about the June 1st contest as well. So we have another quick question from Shelby. If you self-publish the first of a series, is it possible to have a publisher for the rest of the series? I'm assuming she means traditional publisher.
Yes, it is possible. It's not super common unless you sell a lot of copies of that first book. You do hear the stories even in adult publishing about like The Martian, which was self-published, and then it got picked up and of course turned into a great movie with Matt Damon. You hear about a lot of these things, but they're the exception. We actually did, Rashad and I, Rashad's the illustrator for the two books that we've done. We were contacted by a small publisher that was branching into picture books from comics. And Rashad is well known in sequential art. That's what he does. He does comics and graphic novels mainly. And we talked about it, but basically we felt like, because they were interested in picking it up. Nice. And we talked about it, but it's just still better if we, because Rashad he does this for work for hire. So like he gets a flat, payout, like he gets paid to do it and he keeps the copyright to his art and things like that, but it's not a royalty-based system. And that way we can set up all the bank accounts and everything for the nonprofit so that any cent of royalty that gets made on this book just goes directly into the nonprofit. And it's more complicated if we're going through a publisher and then trying to figure out, that sort of thing.
No, that makes sense. So if you have just an exceptionally, great bestseller in your self-published, book of the first of the series, then at that point you potentially could be fielding offers from traditional publishing houses who are willing to pick that up for the continuation. So
you could. I mean, it has happened. Yes.
Yeah. But that is the exception to the rule generally.
Aragon comes to mind.
Right.
That's the first of that series.
No, you're right. Yeah.
That was self-published originally. However, I want to say it was Stephen King, but I can't remember. It probably wasn't.
No, it wasn't. It was a young man.
Yeah,
some famous author got hold of it on vacation and gave it to his agent, and
Stephen King handed it to his agent.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant he wrote it. I was like, no, okay.
No, there was some famous adult author whose son had bought it on vacation out in Montana in a bookstore, and
well, that helps. I mean, if somebody like Stephen King hands it to
it might not have been Stephen King because I think he's too old to have that age son. But anyway, I can't remember the details.
Yeah. No, I actually read, I think the first several books of Aragon. I don't think I finished the series yet, way back when. I'm going to have to get back to that, but now that I think about it. Okay, so that is from Shelby. Let's see. Okay, and Lisa, this is an interesting one. I actually kind of wanted to ask this at the beginning, but how do you determine the grade or reading level of a given text? Maybe
So
specific.
if
Yeah.
you are writing board books or picture books, you don't have to worry about that because adults are reading them to children.
Mm.
My book has the word anaconda in it. Anaconda limbo. That
Okay.
is a much bigger word than a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old is going to encounter. The adults are reading it, so you don't really have to worry about that. The early readers and the chapter books are for like 6 and 7-year-olds who are just really learning to read, to decode, and then to read kind of fluently. So you do have to worry a little bit of reading level there, although you don't have to stick to, 3-letter words like hop on pop. That's not the expectation anymore. There can be some larger words if the child can figure them out in context. When you get to middle grade novels, which is again is elementary school, it doesn't matter that much. There will be a voice and sentence structure that contributes to that voice. So you're not going to want to have really sophisticated words and long rambly sentences with lots of clauses. But you don't have to worry too much about reading level there. And of course, you don't have to worry about it with YA at all either.
Gotcha.
So really, it's only if you're writing for those, 6 and 7-year-olds who are just learning to read and decode on their own, that you really have to think about reading level.
There's a website that you can plug, you can insert a little, you cut and paste some text and plug it in, and it'll give you like a Lexile score for it. And so if you are writing chapter books, I've done that before. And basically if you make your sentences shorter, that helps a lot bring down the Lexile. So instead of a lot of compound and complex sentences, you write more simple sentences and you do look at the vocabulary.
Gotcha. Well, that is good to know. I mean, these days, I feel like you could just, you could plug it into ChatGPT and be like, hey, is this a middle grade or is this a chapter book or what is this right now? I'll probably tell you at this point. But that is a whole different conversation on that front. But I have a lot of really great questions from Chelsea Chrisman over here. So I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. I know we're running short on time. But she asked, what trends do you see in the KidLit space right now? Please elaborate on picture books all the way to yeah. So I don't know if we're going to be able to, or I say yeah, it's YA. But anyway, what do you think, Melissa? What are some of the big trends that you see right now?
Huge trends are graphic novels. They're across the board from the earliest readers to the YA space. They're becoming super popular. Also, people are looking for kind of escapism right now, happier books. I think people were coming out of COVID and the darker stuff isn't really getting picked up as fast. One thing about trends, though, you got to be really careful because when you are looking at trends, if you write something, by the time you've written it, the trend is kind of past. So that's what's kind of happened. There's getting to be more like YA fantasy is kind of becoming popular again, but still the dystopian isn't selling as well. But eventually it'll come back around. So if you've written something, hold on to it, and you'll probably find a market for it. But right now, I would write something escapist, something an adventure, something positive, in pretty much any age group.
Okay.
However, there are agents on Twitter who are like, send me your horror and your thrillers for middle grade, for elementary school readers.
Yeah,
which would be a really tough thing to nail.
I mean, agents, I mean, they list their preferences, and I mean, you do really have to target agents in terms of like what they're looking for at that point in time. And most of the time they're pretty good about, listing that on their manuscript wish list and all that stuff. I do want to ask, Lisa, have you went through the query trenches essentially in finding your lit agent. Is that correct? Or did you find him or her another way?
I lucked out when I got my agent. We have since parted ways and I am in the query trenches now. But when I found her, I met her at one of our SCBWI conferences before she was an agent. And when she got into agenting, she said, I really love your writing if you ever want to submit it, see if we're a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I lucked into that one. It was a good relationship for a while. And, then people change. Where their focus lies. So
Sure.
I am in the query trenches now. Again, one more trend occurred to me. If you come from a community that has typically not been represented in children's literature, and you are writing about that community, those experiences, that is a trend that's not going away. Agents and editors really want to help get those experiences out in the world. So if you are from an ethnic minority, an immigrant from another country, from another place, LGBTQIA, those experiences are really valued in the KidLit world right now.
Which is great. That is awesome. Okay, so we have 2 big questions left here. We'll see if we can squeeze it in, So we're going to start with about the contest that's starting on June 1st. Melissa, give us the lowdown. What is this contest about? How do you enter it? What is, what's the process? What happens on the back end of it? Tell us a little bit about it.
So I think Jeannie just put the link in the chat, but it is for our Southern Breeze region members. Unfortunately, we don't have enough judges to open it up to everyone. But if you're in our region, which is Georgia, Alabama, and the panhandle of Florida, you can enter through, there's a specific email address that you send it to. There's all the submission guidelines are on the website for how you format the manuscript and how many pages and everything you can send. So all of the submissions that come in during the window, which is June 1st through June 30th, are looked at by our wonderful volunteer, Ruth, who's right here in this room, and make sure they fit all the guidelines. And then they are sent on to our published author judges, and they will judge all of them, and everybody will get feedback. And then the top 15 in each category go to the professional judges. We have an agent that's judging picture books, one that's judging middle grade, and one that's judging young adult. And that is Caitlin Sanchez for picture book, Carly Dizon for middle grade, and Anjanette Barr for young adult. And all of their bios are on our website. And then the top 15 go to those professional judges. They will rank first, second, and third place in each category. And the winners are announced, and the first place winner in each category gets a year membership of SCBWI for their top prize, and then bragging rights on the website and everything. We publicize the winners.
I love that. Have you found that winners of the SCBWI contest or the Southern Breeze contest specifically, has it helped the winners get agented or anything like that?
It's interesting. We just had a whole blog series where Heather Fan, who's been writing our blog post, interviewed winners and had them share their little quotes on what they got from the contest, why they recommend entering the contest.
Perfect.
So we put a little bit of that on social media too, some of those quotes and things like that. So.
Excellent.
So
also, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
I had thought 2x2 was basically not very good, and I entered it in the contest just for the heck of it, and it placed second. So it does often encourage you to make the changes and pursue an agent, pursue publication. Every single entry gets feedback from the 2 published authors.
Yes.
And the top 15 get a third feedback scoring sheet from the agent as well. And occasionally we'll have an agent say, when you've revised this, send it to me. Occasionally they do.
Yeah. And I will mention that for those who are SCBWI members of the Southern Breeze, the contest is free, for that purpose. So, but you do have to be a member specifically to do that. There is time to sign up and do that over the next week. You have an opportunity, but it comes back every year. So as well. Okay. So we're going to close out with a fun one here. Chelsea, thank you for all your questions. I really appreciate it. She asks, what are some of your favorite books from each of you? So this is a question for both of you guys that you would recommend to read. Which books inspired your writing?
So inspired my writing as a kid was Judy Blume. I adored her. And I got to meet her in Atlanta when I was about in 4th grade, which is when I was really deep into reading them. And she was lovely and gracious. I love Kate DiCamillo. I love almost every book that she's written. How she tells a story, how she just makes you really feel like she's in the character's head. I already mentioned The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise. I love that story. I love Rajni LaRocca. Red, White, and Whole was a Newbery Honor winner last year. It's a verse novel about a girl who's Indian American and how she's kind of she has to be two different people, one at school, one at home. I love that. Reem Faruqi wrote several verse novels that are excellent, Unsettled and Golden Girl. And she has a new one coming out next month called Call Me Adnan, which has to do with the child that drowns, which is, as a pediatric nurse, a huge prevention thing for me. I'm like, that book needs to be out there. That book needs to be out there. But like I said, these books, they're deep topics. You know, there's a lot being covered, but those are some of my favorites.
I love that.
A picture book that I keep going back to again and again that I've just discovered in the last year is called Bear Came Along. And it is very sparse language, incredibly gorgeous artwork, a lot of deep meaning. That one, Bear Came Along, and the author is like, the name's escaping me at the moment. A book I finished last night is a YA by Ruta Sepetys, and it's called I Must Betray You. And it's historical fiction about the fall of Romania in 1989. And it is a gut punch of a book because, you know, for me, of course, this was going on in my lifetime. And like most Americans, we weren't aware of it till it was over and we saw how horrible things had been. Anyhow, so yeah, I kind of read all over the place. Lisa Yee is a spot on middle grade author. I highly recommend all of her books. Her most recent one, Maisie Chen's Last Chance, was shortlisted for I want to say the National Book Award, but I could be wrong on that. It's won all kinds of honors as well. Go into a bookstore, especially an independent bookstore, and talk to the people. What's selling? What do you love? What can't you keep in stock? Show me those books and see what is out there now. Libraries are great, but something that was published 10 years ago might not be the style anymore. So definitely go find your independent bookstore and hang out there a little bit.
I think that is excellent advice. And bookstores are not going away. I know there was like this scare not too long ago where bookstores were going to disappear, but I think they're actually coming back into kind of fun indie popularity. And I don't think they're going away anytime soon. They've definitely evolved themselves into like event spaces for authors and incredibly supportive of authors debuting their books and, you know, and pushing books into the community. And so know your bookmasters, you know, in your local community. It's going to be really helpful to you as an author. So I think that is going to close us out tonight, ladies. That was a plethora of information. I can imagine it was incredibly helpful for everybody who joined us tonight, and I really appreciate all of your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Awesome.